Do you crave better self-esteem and confidence, but struggle to silence your anxiety, fears, and insecurities? If so, welcome to the sisterhood of fellow travelers on the path to reclaiming their self-confidence and happiness. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award-winning author, speaker, and assault survivor. I spent the past few decades helping young women like you overcome fear, self-doubt, and trauma to reclaim their joy and self-worth. I cannot wait to share the secrets I learned on my own healing journey and help you restore your inner warrior as I show you the skills and tools you need to save your own broken world. If you're ready to empower your inner warrior to overcome fear, doubt, and anxiety, turn off those distractions and tune in to this episode. Last episode, we began our exploration of unforgiveness and how adopting a forgiveness mindset leads toward emotional healing and an improved quality of life. I know how real the struggle is to forgive and move on. I also know how forgiveness empowers us to confidently reclaim our peace, happiness, and self-worth. I can't wait to lead you down this healing path. So if you're done letting unforgiveness steal your peace, joy, and quality of life, may this 5-part series help you level up your love game as you continue to restore your inner warrior to live with fierce confidence. As I mentioned in the previous episode, forgiveness is a complex concept and something many of us struggle with. For this reason, I've broken down the forgiveness series into 5 episodes to give each defining element its own breathing room. In this second episode, you'll gain better clarity about the impacts of deep hurt and the pain associated with offense. You'll learn more about the grief and healing process that lead to a healthy forgiveness mindset. And you'll get a behind-the-scenes view of how I developed a forgiveness mindset and use it to fuel my self-love and self-first lifestyle. In the remaining 3 episodes in this series, we'll explore fear of vulnerability and reopening wounds, a need for justice and accountability, and moving beyond our internal barriers and negative emotional reactions to rebuild our forgiveness mindset. I put together this Restore Your Inner Warrior series with power-packed tools that will help you strengthen your inner warrior and overcome the things holding you back from living your best life. If you're ready to boldly step into a life with improved happiness and confidence, turn off those distractions running in the background so you can supercharge your inner healing journey with this next episode. And welcome back to all my listeners already walking down this healing path with me. If you haven't already, consider joining my free Facebook group where you can share stories, gain tips, and get community support. It's the Restore Your Inner Warrior Sisterhood. I'd like to begin this second episode by recapping what forgiveness is and what unforgiveness does to our emotional well-being. When we operate with the forgiveness mindset, we consciously choose to let go of our negative feelings toward the people who have hurt us or offended us. This allows us to cut ourselves free from the dead weight holding us back from living our best life, and it really keeps us from continuing to drink that toxic cocktail that only makes us sick. Forgiveness does not mean that somebody is being allowed to get away with something or they're let off the hook for the consequences of their actions. It's simply a way to free ourselves from the unhealthy emotions that stem from unforgiveness, like bitterness, resentment, and that retaliation mindset that gets us plotting revenge. Unforgiveness also infects other areas of our thinking. It weakens that heart-mind connection and spirit connection that I was talking about last episode when you trifold cord those 3 together, and that's where we draw our strength, is when the 3 of those are weaved together, as opposed to being broken down or trying to operate separately from each other. Like so many emotional wounds, when it comes to being offended or hurt by someone, we do experience grief. This is something that I talk about a lot in my recently re-released self-help book, Warrior Sister, Cut Yourself Free. And it's also a concept that I'm revisiting in the forthcoming self-help book, Restore Your Inner Warrior, that complements this podcast series. And grief is a very nuanced thing. It has different stages. I adapted my own stages that kind of started off of Kubler-Ross's, but then I ended up developing 8 different stages that I felt more accurately fit dealing with trauma. The more I work with this grief process, I realize that it is adaptable to fit the broader
trauma and grieving and healing that I'm talking about. At a very basic level, our emotions are attached to unresolved grief, and this will become triggers in our daily interactions. I want you to think about the larger picture here that if we don't deal with the grief and we operate in unforgiveness, we end up developing these negative emotions that linger and become long-term kind of house guests in our internal space. And then they become triggers for all other interactions that we're involved in. So it doesn't just affect our takeaway from a particular experience that wounded us or that offended us, it also affects future interactions. So it is really important to work through these grieving stages and adopt a forgiveness mindset because that unforgiveness mindset, it really traps us and our emotions in this kind of internal bubble that festers with toxic thoughts, and these thoughts compound our suffering, and then they start to ooze out of us, and then they start to make other people who have to be around us and deal with us suffer also from that kind of toxicity just oozing out and infecting everything it touches. To get a better understanding of how deep hurt and pain impact our emotions, we need to briefly revisit this grief process that I talk about in Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free. Through my research and training and experience, I did adopt these particular grief stages, and here they are in their different numbered order. So the first one is shock and denial, the second one is pain, the third one is recall, the fourth is guilt and shame, the fifth is anger, the sixth is depression, seventh is hope and acceptance, and then the eighth is recovery. So I'd really like to just narrow down on a few of these to talk about today because they really stand out when we consider what goes into healing this internal space in order to keep operating in a forgiveness mindset and how to deal with some of those unforgiveness thoughts and emotions that we are struggling with. It does suck when we are hurt by someone or offended by someone, whether they intend to offend us or not. It doesn't matter in the scope of leaving us still to deal with those emotions. We can, of course, gain a better perspective that helps us see that maybe something wasn't intentional or wasn't personal or wasn't even really an offense. And that's a whole other process too that we're going to talk about in another episode. For the sake of starting today in some of these grief stages, I want to begin with pain. Pain is the number two thing on my list, and pain is a trigger warning. That's the best way I can describe it. It's a trigger warning. We're not supposed to ignore the trigger warning, but what do we do with it? So pain is our mind's way of getting our attention to say, hey, we need to address something over here. And then we have to come in and we have to figure out what is it exactly that we need to address? How might we address it? When we experience emotional pain, it's critical to assess and treat it so whatever is causing it doesn't progress into something worse. Think about this when we're dealing with a physical injury. We would put certain medications on it. We would treat it a specific way. We might even need to get medical attention for it. And then we would be diligent about making sure we care for it properly. The same thing is true when we're dealing with internal wounds. Even though maybe no one can really see them on the outside, sometimes people can sense that we're struggling with something. Sometimes people know exactly what we're struggling with because they watch us get triggered. And it's not very difficult in those instances to be like, that person's struggling with ... fill in the blank. And if someone else can spot it on the outside, it probably means we, if we pay good enough attention, can start to really recognize what those triggers are and what our responses are to those triggers. And if those align with the character qualities that we want to embody in order to keep growing into that version of ourselves that is our end game goal and desire. Then there's anger, which is a really complex kind of just blanket word that we use in the editing world to just be like, this is just a place marker for the word that we really mean. There's a better word. So we could be talking about being annoyed, displeased, aggravated, furious, frustrated, agitated, on and on and on. You fill in the blank. What is that particular anger? And again, when we're trying to figure out what exactly the emotion is, you have to get past the label of just saying anger. You have to get at what is it? Was it indignant what you experienced? Was it just insulting? You have to get at that deeper emotional word that better qualifies what is the root of your anger. That will really help you in knowing how to move forward. Even if you're in real time, or if you're saying, okay, moving forward into another interaction with this individual, this is what I'm going to do, because there's a big difference between being vexed, pissed off, irritated, enraged, and just being heartbroken, heartsick. There's huge differences, and how you're going to approach those things are determined by what type of emotion we're actually dealing with here. Regardless of which emotion you identify, the one thing that I have learned about anger is it knows no limits. It's an automatic response to pain. So that's why I connect it to those two grief stages. And anger is an earned emotion. So when we talked about a few episodes ago where we do the cause and effect and consequence kind of chain of events, again, whether it was intentional or unintentional, that anger to the feeling is merited. It has value. It has place. Even if you get to the rare instance where you're like, okay, I totally overreacted. There was no offense here at all. It still has merit, because maybe in that instance where you're figuring out, okay, maybe it just had to do more with me. For instance, I have a deeper rooted frustration, and this little thing triggered me and made me paranoid, thinking I was going into a repeat offense, when in fact I just have this old compounded issue that I need to go revisit and heal and grieve through, so that something like this doesn't trigger it again. So you can see it's still merited, it's still valuable. It's what you do with it. And we have to choose what we're going to do with that anger. We have to choose what we're going to do with the emotion to heal it and to heal our inner wound. When ignored, anger can infect other areas of our life and lead to problems that reduce our quality of life. This also leads to chronic irritability and aggression, like I mentioned before, where your anger, or whatever that anger word is that you fill in, becomes a default response for every emotional trigger. And I do see this in a lot of people that I love and I care about. And it doesn't even matter what age. It seems to be like an ageless issue where people do not know how to deal with these things. And then they become these triggers that trigger really ugly behaviors out of people. I mean, just look at road rage, for instance. You got to look at people, no matter how endangered they're putting your safety in that moment of their rage. There's a part of us that recognizes and says, what's really at the anger of this hostility and this level of rage? Clearly, it can't possibly be me triggering it to this level of aggression when we don't have anything meaningful or deep between the two of us. We just came across each other, literally crossed paths on the road moving. You can't possibly be that enraged by me. You don't even know me to be that passionately emotional about anything. So, when you think about that chronic irritability and aggression, I always think about the road rage people. And it is really hard, trust me, to just try to get to that thinking really fast, because you are also in a survival mode and you are being offended by their behavior on the road, putting your safety in jeopardy, doing all kind of things where now you're playing cat and mouse and you're playing games with big, deadly vehicles. All those different things come into play. You're in survival mode while you're also trying to empathize and figure out, don't take it personal, or just get the heck away from this person, get out of Dodge quickly. All these things come into play. When ignored, anger can infect other areas in our life and lead to problems that reduce our quality of life. They also lead to chronic irritability and aggression, where anger becomes a default response to every emotional trigger. So we must find healthy ways to express it as we work through the offense. Then there's depression, anger's hangover. Anger is the sugar rush for which depression is the inevitable sugar crash. What energy we draw in a fit of rage will usually fade into lethargy, where we move in slow motion through some darkened dreamscape that vaguely resembles the world we know. This is what I've personally experienced as an area that sets me back in my forgiveness mindset, because it really zaps all of my motivation to deal with anything. That's how depression works. So when we get stuck in a state of depression and we're not grieving through whatever emotions we need to grieve through and all of the feelings and thoughts that go along with that, when we don't do that and we stay long term in a state of depression or easily fall back into it because we're continually triggered due to those unresolved issues, then it's a really dark and lonely place. And I know so many people who get trapped in that particular place. So we have people who get trapped in the angry mode, like think about those road rage drivers. And you know, when they're raging, you can't possibly be the cause of their aggravation to such a passionate level because it's not that deep. You know, it's not you that's causing this level of rage. However, they're probably doing this in other areas of their life. And you can kind of recognize that even if you're not going to use it to dismiss what's happening, or while you're forced into a position to, cat and mouse, get away from this person who's endangering everybody on the road. But depression keeps you in this dark cycle and it keeps you isolated. And that's a really dangerous place to stay because we want to work through the offenses and we want to figure out how to get into that forgiveness mindset so that we can get back out there. We have to live our life. There's a time to be depressed and grieve through it and move through those processes and move through those stages. Of course, anybody who tells you you're not allowed to grieve something is an insensitive jerk. I know that the era that I grew up and even the era that my parents grew up, that was kind of a thing. Suck it up, get over it. Worse things have happened. What are you doing? Why are you so depressed? Look at everything you have to be grateful for. And all those dismissive things that people say that just make us feel worse about it. It doesn't actually make us shake it off. Even if we put on the resilience mask and go back out there, if we don't actually deal with the depression, it's going to very easily keep creeping back into our life. And all of these emotions feed into our deep hurt and pain when we feel offended. They all do. They feed in different ways. Sometimes they're compounded, sometimes one at a time. And I have really been facing this topic head on recently, this over the last year. So 2025 has been a real face the offense, face the chronic hurt. And this message is really raw to me. So it's very ironic that I'm bringing it to you right now while I'm just on the tail end of working through some refresher on how to have my game plan and how am I going to operate in particular situations. So I have gone through some recent experiences where I'm dealing with dishonesty and exclusion from, a particular circle of individuals, a group that I belong to. And, it dates back, this sense of always excluding me from things dates back forever. And there's a long history of it that exists. And, sometimes we have to know when to completely cut those types of relationships out. And sometimes we're just really not in a position to entirely cut those relationships out. So we have to decide, what is that relationship going to look like moving forward? What are my boundaries going to be? What are my expectations out of these relationships going to be? And obviously, when there are multiple people, there will be different types of relationships that you have. So if you're dealing with a handful of individuals, for instance, let's say we're dealing with 5 individuals, they all have a different relationship with you outside of that circle of 6 individuals. You might not have any interaction with certain individuals outside of collectively coming together. So I keep experiencing this chronic pattern of being excluded and kind of being gaslit about that exclusion. And that part, if I can label it, is really irritating. It is insulting because, when you see what people do, even though they've said, I'm going to do this particular thing in past experiences, like you go to them and you say, it really hurts me when you don't offer the invitation, extend the invitation to me. You can't just be like, oh, well, we thought you were busy. And then that excuse can no longer be something that they're ignorant about once you talk about it with them, to say, I'm not actually too busy to stop my work and stop what I'm doing to prioritize, spending quality time with people that I love and care about having a relationship with and care about helping and being there for these individuals. And I hope that they would be there for me as well. And so when we're looking at these type of relationships, which in this case I am. And I, have already gone in the past to each individual in the group to have those one-on-ones over and over and over and over, decades of this, over and over and over again. And the promise in the future. Okay, it won't happen in the future. And so recently I had a series of events dealing with the same circle of individuals. And, I was like, hey, let me be involved. What's going on with this? What's going on with that? Oh, nothing. Or, oh, we already have it taken care of. It's a real small, group of people that's doing this or that, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then you see the pictures on social media. And then you're like, oh, okay, so it was everyone except for me. I was not included in that, but it was real small. So, okay, I get it now. And so you have to deal with those feelings of being excluded and recognize that they're not interested in having you there. That you have to take people at the face value of what they're showing you. They are showing you that despite saying it isn't personal, despite saying anything other than we really don't want to include you in these things. So recently, I had been dealing with a couple of things where I was like, oh my gosh, I keep being excluded in these different interactions. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Again, it's not up to me to decide where I do get and don't get included. And I went through the process of making peace, saying something to the individuals that I wanted to say something to, and moving on. So now here comes another event. So I say to one of the individuals, hey, do you need help with anything? No, we have it under control. We have a professional company. Really, you don't need any help with anything. Nope, they're taking care of everything. Okay. So now, next day, here's the day of the event, and here's all the pictures of everybody coming together on some kind of already planned committee to do this setup. And guess what? That wasn't the truth. And I asked the right questions. And I was very cautious to ask very pointed questions. And those were met with just bold-faced lies. And that really was disheartening because I really value having a relationship with this individual who was just looking me right in the face, knowing that the very next day she was going to post something about it. She can't possibly have forgotten the conversation we had the day before and exactly what she told me. I mean, I don't know. I'm assuming maybe she did not put a lot of thought into it and thus doesn't remember it. But then moving forward, it's just really disheartening also, not just to be lied to, but that she's okay with me not being there. That was really disheartening. And I have to go through that grief process and make peace with it, decide to forgive. I have to operate in a forgiveness mindset. But I also have had to make a lot of decisions about the level and depth of the relationship that I want to have with this individual and some of the other individuals in this circle of people. And it just starts to create more distance and more distance to where you almost can't really call it a relationship at all. It's just, oh, what's the word? Like you just occasionally see each other and it's not that deep. Where it's one of those instances where it really should be a lot deeper than that. But again, I can't make people want something meaningful and deep with me that they're just not interested in having. And I have to grieve it. And they have to also deal with the consequences of certain actions. So again, operating in that forgiveness mindset doesn't let them off the hook from the consequences of, for instance, lying. I don't know that I will confront this person again because it's been a chronic, pattern and vicious cycle of chasing my own tail when I do confront this individual. So, I'm again still in the raw throes of it, but I've been through this circus act enough times to know how it ends or how the show is going to go, what the concession stands are going to offer, and all those other things. And so I can keep showing up, putting on the resilience mask, and getting through specific things to keep that relationship at a distance. But there may come a time where I'm not going to put that energy into it either, where I'm going to say, okay, you're showing me that you don't want this with me. Even if we should have this, you're showing me that you don't want it with me, and I'm going to have to make peace with that. So I'm not quite at that place yet, and I really pray that I don't get to that place with some of these individuals that I'm talking about, but it may be inevitable if this is the trajectory and this is the way things go. You can keep being a good sport over and over and over again, and that can only get you so far if those things go against what your boundaries are, what your expectations are out of these relationships, what your, what your emotional capacity, we haven't really talked about capacity, what your emotional capacity can even handle. Sometimes we just have other things going on around us and we just have no capacity for that level of offense and hurt. And we have to get to that really tough spot sometimes to decide, I need to protect myself, I need to protect my peace, and I need to cut this relationship off, even if it affects how I'm accepted or not accepted in the remaining four people in the group. And those are really hard decisions that we sometimes have to make. And we have to be willing to get to a point where we do make it. I'm not saying you have to make those decisions in rash. Obviously, you want to go through that process of assessing the whole situation, gaining a larger perspective, and figuring out what you need to figure out in order to see the particular details in those chronic patterns, what roles that you might be playing, what boundaries might not be clear, what boundaries might need to be rebuilt and reestablished, what, conversations might need to happen, all those different things. You need to decide that for these regular interactions that you are considering rebuilding and healing. And something I want to encourage you, I don't know if you are struggling with this also, but don't let people gaslight you. Don't let them tell you you're imagining things when their words don't line up with what they're showing you and their actions. Just because they say it doesn't make it true and doesn't dismiss the impacts that it has on wounding your emotions and offending you. So I just want to encourage you, don't just allow people to just gaslight it and make it go away. That'll make you go out of your mind. You will be second guessing yourself all the time. And that's usually the first trigger that happens when someone starts to gaslight you, is you start to go back and you're thinking, like, wait a minute, did I misread this? Am I overreacting? Am I seeing things that aren't really here? Was I overreacting all those other times? And we start to go crazy, chasing all these thoughts and doubt. Then we enter into this spirit of doubt, and we're doubting our own capability to know about what's going on in our own experiences and the emotional, impacts of those experiences. So, it sucks. We live in a time where, gaslighting is so normalized, and you see it happening all the time. You even see it happening in mass media and like advertisement media. It's awful. So remember that we will know the truth by what others show us, and you have to believe them. So there's that also. Believe people when they show you how they really value you and what you really mean to them, even in the interactions where they're offending you. You need to watch their behavior and sometimes their words. What are they saying to you? What are they doing to you in that exchange that is offending you, that is hurting you, that is wounding your emotions? Believe them. See it at its face value also. If we have to psychoanalyze every single interaction and constantly be giving people the benefit of the doubt, well, they probably meant this, or they're hurting, and hurting people hurt people, and all that other stuff. It's okay for you to understand that in order to empathize and get a larger perspective and not internalize like, oh, this is just directly toward me, but it doesn't have to dismiss it. So even if you're forgiving them, like, I'm releasing you, I'm cutting myself free from the negative emotions that are attached to this offensive interaction, and you do with it what you want to do with it. You take the correction or you figure out what you want to do with it. And when we choose to forgive, there are specific steps that we compare with this decision. For instance, what effects and consequences arise from the offense? Do we need to express our emotions, or have we already exhausted this effort? Like I mentioned before, what level do we need to do? Are we expressing it for the first time? Maybe it is a chronic pattern and we've never expressed it before because we didn't realize, like, oh, yes, I actually need to say something to that individual. Not saying something can stem out of, like I was sharing with my own experience, I've already said it. I've said it 24 times. I don't need to say it again. It's clearly not getting through, or it's clearly not being received or respected. And that's a whole other issue. Again, we have to decide, are we going to continue to allow that a level of disrespect? Are we going to continue to try to put a lot of energy into rebuilding a relationship that somebody doesn't even respect us enough to treat us well? We have to make those decisions. Are we interested in rebuilding this relationship, or do we need to let it go? Again, that's that really tough decision. So I'll wrap up this session with a little encouragement that builds off of the last episode. It really is important for us to grieve these instances of hurt and offense. Unforgiveness, again, is that toxic cocktail that wreaks havoc in every area of our life. It isn't an option for us to operate in this unforgiveness mindset if we want to maintain our emotional health and the character that we are trying to continue to evolve and grow into that matches up with those end-term goals and those desires that are down the road. We have to continue to make decisions for ourselves at the end of the day on every level that align with that. And we have to be willing to revisit that and adjust it when it's necessary to make those adjustments, because we will change. Other people will change. Environments and situations will change to where we have to make adaptations in order to coexist in these situations with these individuals in these spaces. So you have to be willing to do those things as well. Something that I have learned in my long time history of working with the forgiveness mindset is to choose to release it to a higher power. Release it to God and release it to the universe. I talked about a few examples of this in last episode, and what I could plan in my wildest, meanest way couldn't compare to just what ends up catching up with individuals. And again, coming back to what I just said about trying to maintain your high moral fiber and the character that you say you want to have, you can't let yourself slip into that vindictive, mean-spirited thing where you are being a vigilante and justice will be yours. And then you start to come up with these really devious ways that you're going to pay someone back. And now you're not just reducing yourself to their level, you're lowering yourself. You're lowering the bar and saying, I will one up you. I will show you. But I don't think that you or I are aspiring to be that character, that level of character. I think we're aspiring to grow into a better, healthier version of ourselves, to a more empathetic thinker, to a more, compassionate responder, to a fierce warrior who doesn't let these things hold her down forever. We get knocked down, we go through the process of healing, and we get right back up. And when we get right back up, we're a more powerful force than when we went back down. And that's the beautiful part about investing in ourselves and working through these difficult things. So when we operate with that forgiveness mindset, we are putting ourselves first. So it's an act of self-love, and it's an act of self-first. It's a self-first care. And I know some people are like, oh, you need to put others first. No, girl. You need to put yourself first. If you've ever sat on a flight and you've heard the flight attendants give the instructions in case of an emergency and all the different paraphernalia and instructions on how to use that, when the oxygen mask drops down, the instructions are always the same. Please secure your own oxygen mask over your mouth before you try to assist other passengers. It's that simple. We have to put ourselves first in that capacity. We have to be giving ourselves the oxygen first so that then we can be even effective to helping other people around us. We can't help someone else if we're not able to breathe. It's just a very basic foundational thing. So keep that in mind. That self-first care is super important. And this forgiveness mindset is putting you first, because you're saying, I am not going to drink that toxic cocktail that slowly sucks the life out of me. And again, allow yourself to work through those grief stages and to heal your emotional stress. I use the word stress because it really is stress. So you want to heal that stress, work through those emotions, work through the grief stages that are there to help aid in that restoration. We will continue to explore working through unforgiveness and strengthening our forgiveness mindset in the remaining episodes in this series. Until we meet again, may these new insights and strategies be a lamp unto your path and a guide on your emotional healing journey.
Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, don't forget to follow my channel and share it with girlfriends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. Also, if this podcast inspired you, consider leaving a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. And as you go through your day, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Ciao.